So I now hope you have all been able to respond to question 3 of Baki's WPR approach in the previous, as I recommended in the previous recording. So how did you go about that? Were you able to drop something on the Padlet about that and answering question 3? And maybe if we can still remember that question 3 is about understanding the conditions that allowed or created the problem representation. So when we consider this in relation to housing policy, we might think about the impact of neoliberalism, for example, versus deregulation, and how neoliberalism has promoted the market as the dominant provider of housing, and that reduced government interference or government responsibility for housing provision, and even kind of, incentivizing, investment property and privatizing, housing more, generally. And we might consider how key binaries or key ideas like the investment in social housing versus incentive for investors and other concepts like casualization of workforce and deinstitutionalization, how all those got to, justify the context for what we now consider housing crisis in the Australian context. So these are the things you might want to consider in responding to question 3. And I think they are pretty much straightforward in the case study. So now let's look at question 4, which is also needed for your assessment. I guess you have noticed already that we need 3 of these questions: question 1, question 2, and question 4. We shall not use question 3 in the second assessment for this course. Pretty much really encourage you to focus on these 3 questions as you start thinking about your second assessment in the course. As we said, question 4 is about what is left unproblematic in the problem representation. So this is another question which is very important for your second assessment. And what Baki really means by this question is that we should look carefully at the issues or views that are not considered in this specific problem representation. So ideally, by framing the issue in a particular way, what ideas have been overlooked or shut down? What considerations are not being considered in the way we speak about the problem? So this question really asks us to think about what is missing or left out in the way a certain problem is being framed. Again, I would encourage you to go back to your Padlet and drop your answer in what you think is left unspoken about in the way the housing problems are spoken about in that case study. And that will be very useful to see what conversations or what ideas you come with in responding to question 4. And remember, this exercise is very, very important because it prepares you to your second assessment in this course. So you might also, in answering question 4, you might also want to think, what is missing, what is left out, but also what fails to be problematized in the author's account. What are the limitations of this problem representation? Are there any tensions or contradictions in the way the problem is spoken about? How could we think about the problem differently? So try to be, large enough in your analysis, and that will help you get more insights on how you respond question 4. And one way to help find these silences is also to look at other policy statements or problem representations on the same issue. So, for example, Jonathan Srui's idea, which we are unpacking in this lecture, Jonathan Srui himself is a Green councillor, so he's for the Greens, and clearly he holds political values or beliefs which align with the Greens, and that might be different when you look at other policies put forward by the LNP or other political parties here in Australia. So if you really find this difficult to identify the silences, try just comparing this statement to one other statement which you might find or which you might find in our workbook, or which I would suggest in a further lecture. So think about this, and again, drop your answer to the Padlet, and then we shall take it from there. Thank you very much. And yeah, again, as I said, try to be careful on all the issues and see what is being said, what is not being said, what is considered, what is not considered. And in answering those questions, you will be fine.